We all know that times change, and as generations come and pass, borders between nations rise and fall, languages are born and die, and even food has to adjust with the times. What you eat today is vastly different from what you would have eaten 1,000 years ago. I'm Mike with List 25, and let's take a look at 25 of the strangest dishes that are no longer at the top of the menu. #25. Garum, the fermented fish sauce of ancient Rome. If you were looking for a little flavor back in the days of ancient Rome, you wouldn't look for the seasoning salt or sriracha, you'd grab some garum. They'd use this a bit like ketchup on the side of a dish as a condiment, but it was made from fish that they allowed to ferment out in the sun in a clay pot with spices like dill and coriander and other herbs. They even found sealed jars of it in Pompeii to get the spice mix down and recreate it in modern times. The result was a fishy, protein-packed, umami-filled sauce. 24. Braised Flamingo. Chicken is one of the most widely eaten proteins in the world today, but we do indulge in some other birds like turkey, duck, and even ostrich now and then, sometimes turducken. That said, flamingo is definitely one bird you won't see served up all that often, but only in modern times. Back in the day, it was definitely on the menu, if you could afford it. Native to parts of Africa, the well-to-do culinary adventurers in Rome could afford to enjoy a braised flamingo. If you were really in high society, you'd only eat the fanciest parts. The filet mignon of the flamingo, as it were, which were things like the brain or the tongue. 23. Cockentrice. There's a chance that even if you don't know food history, you still know something close to a cockentrice. This is especially true if you're a fan of fantasy fiction in games like D&D or Magic the Gathering. That's because a cockatrice was a mythological creature similar in both name and appearance to this dish. In stories, a cockatrice did somewhat resemble a chicken, but with reptilian legs and a tail. It was like a two-legged dragon. Like Medusa, its gaze could turn you to stone. The Cockentrice, a dish from the Middle Ages, was also an amalgam beast, but in this case it was a suckling pig's head and upper body literally attached to the hind end of a chicken. Why would anyone make such a thing? Well, so you could have pork and chicken for dinner, along with a little show when it came out to the table. 22. The helmeted cock. As we saw with the cockentrice, people back in the day liked a visual spectacle when it came to their food. Few dishes can come close to matching what the helmeted cock brought to the table. Like a cockentrice, it was a mishmash of chicken and pork. But in this case, the chicken is riding the pig like it was a knight on its trusty steed. Both animals were roasted, but the chicken was stuffed. The recipe then indicates that you need to have it sit on the pig. You put a little paper helmet on its head and give it a lance, because why not? You'll then dress it in the colors of the Lord for whom it is being served. That needs to come back. 21. Virgin boy eggs. This entry is gross, so be forewarned. More concerning is the fact that, though there is evidence that this tradition started hundreds of years ago, there is one town in China where they still make this dish. It's called virgin boy eggs, and they're eggs hard-boiled in the urine of boys under the age of 10. The schools in town literally have buckets set up for the collection of urine, which the egg makers buy and use. Some just get it from the parents. In case you're wondering, the whole process apparently smells terrible, but the belief is they have health benefits. The town of Dongyang has been making them for hundreds of years. That doesn't make it better. Sometimes tradition doesn't mean it's automatically great. 20. Cock ale. If you like beer, then surely medieval ale would probably be right up your alley. And if you like chicken, then you could drink a beer alongside your chicken, right? Well, some people didn't have time for two things. So in 1669, because of course it was, the recipe for cock ale was devised. And it calls for you to mix a handful of fruit and spices, like raisins and nutmeg, into a bunch of ale with a boiled chicken. Apparently there was a belief that the food you ate could give you some of the qualities that the creature possessed in life, and chicken was prized for its vitality and vigor, so if you drank chicken beer, maybe you'd get some of that power. It was also devised in part to get people to stop drinking coffee, which was felt to be making Englishmen too French. Oui. 19. Ostrich Ragout. Ostrich is farmed in a number of places these days, but it's still relatively rare and exotic to most of us. Back in the day, they were much rarer, and in ancient Rome, they were considered very exotic and mostly saved for special occasions. So, how do you cook a bird that can weigh close to 300 pounds? In the case of Ostrich Ragout, you boil the bird whole and serve it that way too, along with some seasoning and fish. 18. Sour ram's testicles. Also known as Surser de Hutspranger, I'm not Icelandic, sorry. Sour ram's testicles comes from Iceland. A lot of traditional Icelandic food is preserved because it was made in a time before refrigeration, so you needed a reliable way to preserve it over the long haul. In this case, ram's testicles would be pickled in whey for months and months until they were nice and sour. They then can be pressed into blocks to make a sort of loaf that could be sliced and eaten. Oddly enough, traditional foods like these made a comeback in Iceland in the 1950s, so even though they had been pushed aside for quite a long time, they came back again and can be found in some places if you go hunting. 17. Chewy milk. Irish cuisine is often unfairly limited to potatoes in most people's minds, which misses the mark, since Ireland had been populated for over 9,000 years before the potato even arrived. Prior to potatoes, there were many wild fruits and vegetables, as well as a lot of seafood and shellfish. Dairy was also very big, as they raised cattle not for beef, but for milk and cheese. There are stories of a kind of milk made in ancient Ireland that was yellow and bubbly, and if that doesn't sound appetizing enough, you had to chew it rather than drink it. Like, slowly, and for a long time. Like it was a kind of dairy bubblegum. 16. Witchetty Grub. In the West, we often don't hear a lot about Australian cuisine, and when we do, it's rarely Aboriginal Australian cuisine. People live for thousands of years off the land in Australia, a place not known for being the most hospitable part of the world. So what did people in ancient times use to eat when dealing with deadly snake spiders and oppressive weather? Well, among other things, they ate witchetty grub. These fat little grubs can actually be the larval form of several insects, including some species of moths and beetles. They made their home underground in the roots of something called a witchetty bush, hence the name. Aboriginal people would dig them up, and they provided a solid hit of protein. Just 10 gives an adult all the protein they need in a day. Some say they almost taste like chicken, almonds, or peanuts, depending on how they're prepared. Others say they taste like garbage. 15. Deep-fried maple leaves. Despite how it may seem, deep-fried maple leaves are not a Canadian treat. Instead, they're a traditional Japanese dish in one Japanese city dating back hundreds of years, possibly 1,300 years. They only use yellow leaves on their journey from green of the summer to red of late fall, and they can't have fallen from the tree yet. The leaves are battered and fried and have a slightly sweet and salty taste to them. 14. Posca. In ancient Greece and Rome, if you were thirsty, you might be tempted to reach for a Posca. It features herbs and spices for flavor, which sounds fine. But it also uses as a base either sour wine or just vinegar diluted with water. So, sour water. 13. Pig uterus. Some cuisines are known for using all parts of a slaughtered animal. Many Western eaters find this odd, and certain cuts are just not considered pleasant. Things like brains and feet and organ meat are often ignored in the West. The ancient Romans were clearly more adventurous with their dining, as witnessed in dishes like pig uterus. Modern eaters who have tried the recipe don't have a lot of nice things to say, especially about the smell. 12. Broxy Meat. If you were a poor working class person in Victorian times, meat was hard to come by. Well, good meat, anyway. But you could always roll the dice on Broxy Meat and see what happens. Broxy meat could be any meat, from sheep to cow to pork, that was taken from an animal that had dropped dead. It wasn't slaughtered. It died. Probably from a disease. So if the animal had a heart attack, maybe the meat was okay. If it had an infectious disease, maybe it would kill you too. 11. Tlacatlaolli. Pozole is a Mexican soup that's pretty popular, but has some very ominous origins. It comes from a dish called Tlacatlaolli, which means men-shelled corn. This rare dish was once reserved for important members of the pre-colonial Tenochtitlan society in Mexico. Modern pozole is made with pork or other meat. This ancient version? Human. 10. Fesikh. Fesikh is an ancient Egyptian dish made from fermented fish once harvested from the receding banks of the Nile as the fish lay rotting in the sun. The recipe is thousands of years old, and bafflingly, it's enjoyed a renaissance in modern times, even though it can be poisonous if it's made wrong. Fesikh is made by fermenting fish, and the risk of food poisoning is high. 18 people died from eating a bad batch in 1991. This list not brought to you by a Bad Batch, coming soon, actually today. 9. Ambergris. Ambergris is worth a lot of money and was highly prized in the perfume industry. It comes from whales, and the use of it has dropped off considerably thanks to laws against whaling. But you can still sell it if you find a chunk that washes up naturally on shore. And there was a time when it was a prized delicacy to eat as well. So, what is it? A very waxy substance produced in a whale's digestive tract. They would excrete it, as in poop, and it could float around the ocean for years as the scent began to mellow and became desirable. 8. Black soup. Thanks to the movie 300, we all have this idea of Spartans being the toughest people who ever existed. Is it all fiction? Well, check out the Spartan dish of black soup. It was made from blood, pig's leg, vinegar, and salt. The vinegar kept the blood from clotting, so essentially, it's just pig and pig's blood with salt to taste. That's pretty hardcore. 7. Salted pressed fish ovaries. The Nile River was obviously incredibly important to many aspects of life in ancient Egypt, and that included their diet. Seafood from the river was a major part of the Egyptian diet, and sometimes it got a little weirder than just traditional fish or shellfish. Though later versions from Italy and France were known as bortargo, the basic idea of salted pressed fish ovaries was to cure or smoke the fish roe pouch and serve it sliced. 6. Dormice. In some parts of the world, dormice are a real pest. In ancient Rome, they were a real treat. Not a particularly large animal by any means, but they were fattened up in little clay pots on diets of things like chestnuts and walnuts, and then roasted or even stuffed and then eaten as snacks. 5. Pig udder stuffed with sea urchin. In modern times, only certain parts of animals are considered edible, but there is little you can't eat on a living thing if you're a carnivore. One such part is pig udder. Have you ever eaten one? Well, probably not. But the Romans might have enjoyed one stuffed with sea urchin just to keep it interesting. 4. Locusts. Chiefly known as a biblical plague, locusts are also a good source of protein if you're in a pinch, and the ancient Greeks took full advantage of that for snacking. You can still find grasshoppers and locusts on menus in some Asian countries. But Greece, where bread and olives and seafood were in abundance, even in ancient times, it's a little more surprising. 3. Corpses. Cannibalism is one of the great taboos of nearly every society and culture in history. Nearly everyone, but not all of them. Some cultures didn't consider eating the dead a violation. In Papua New Guinea, some of the tribes there would eat their dead. To most other cultures, this sounds gruesome, if not downright terrifying. But from the perspective of the tribes, this was the ultimate act of love. If they buried their dead in the ground, they would rot and be eaten by insects. So by eating their own dead, they were saving them from that fate and becoming one with them. 2. Soil. The act of eating dirt is called geophagy. Usually it's kids that do it, or maybe adults by accident, but not always. Sometimes it's an expression of a condition called pica, where you're tempted to eat non-food items. But it's also been a cultural thing in various ancient cultures, including among Native Americans, South Americans, and Africans, where it could be eaten for a number of reasons, including wanting to improve your skin. 1. Mummies. Finishing up this trio of terrible ideas, people in the Victorian era used to eat mummies. Real, actual Egyptian mummies. They took them medicinally in a tradition that started as far back as the 16th century. One belief was that a mummy ground into powder and ingested could cure internal bleeding, because why not? Bits of the skull could cure headaches, and so on. So, would you eat any of these? If so, which ones? God, I hope it's not people, mummies, or dirt. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, click that notification bell so you don't miss it on any new content, including our shorts. And in case you just want little bite-sized versions of List 25, sometimes you don't have time for a whole 25, so do our little bite 25s. Don't forget to join our Discord, and if you want, please consider becoming a member. That helps keeps us going so that we can keep bringing this amazing content to you. I love you guys, and as always, see you next time.
Enjoying our lists? Be sure to click that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Share them with your friends and help us consistently conciliate curiosity. And if you want even more lists, check out these videos here or just head to our website at list25.com.